take a look at what does the Shabaka stone really stay? What does the Shabaka stone stay, and what does it really mean, and why is it significant? So I wanted to come here today and kind of follow up on some things that we've been thinking about and talking about with respect to Kushite theology and Kushite beliefs, because a lot of times we talk about ancient Kemet, but we don't really talk about the Kushite contributions there and Kushite thought. And we talked a lot about King Pianki yesterday, and we're going to talk today about his relatives, King Shabaka and the Shabaka stone. What is the Shabaka stone? And we're going to kind of jump into that. So as we start to look at that, this is actually a representation of the deity Ptah, which presents very prominently on the Shabaka stone. The idea of Ptah presents very prominently there. So we're going to jump in there, and I'll say up front, I want to thank you for all those who are supporting. I want to say up front, for those who are members, the resource that we're going to go over today, God bless you. How you doing, Team Z? How you doing? God bless you. Hope you're well. The resource that we're going to go over today, you have access to. So if you are a member here on YouTube and you're a paid member, it's at least $4.99 a month. I very much appreciate it. I offer resources that you can download and read for yourself, because a lot of people, as we're studying ancient Kemet and ancient Kush, there's something that reading does for you. There's something about the ability of actually taking something inside you and kind of meditating on it. Reading is kind of meditative. And one of the reasons I think it's meditative is because when you read something, you're reading it a lot of times in your own voice. You are interpreting it for yourself. You are saying, what does this mean to me? You are filling in the blanks with your imagination. And that's all about meditation. It really has a lot to do with ancient Kushite and Kemetic beliefs. So we're going to jump into that and talk about that and why that's significant and what did the Shabaka stone say. And as we talk about the Shabaka stone, it's going to be important for us to talk about a couple of things. And as we talk about a couple of things, we're going to talk a little bit about the concept of netter, because that helps us understand what the Shabaka stone kind of means and what it kind of says and some things to that. And so I'll kind of put this in, kind of minimize myself here so you can see that whole concept of netter. What were the ancient Kemetic people talking about? Because when we talk about the Shabaka stone, one of the things they talk about, and the reason why they mention it, it's called also the Memphite theology. If you heard the Memphite theology, I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of great comments to put down below. It talks a lot about the god Ptah, and it talks about, and you look at it from a perspective of, it mentions the concept of one creator, the concept of everything coming from one creator. And a lot of times people will not look at ancient Kushite people and Kemetic people as having said that, as that having been an idea or a concept present in ancient Kemet, and how they manifested it and how they looked at things differently, looked at the world differently. A lot of people don't talk about that, but how could they think about the concept of God coming from one source, but then also talk about Ptah and also talk about Amen and Atum and that type of thing. And so we're going to talk about that as well as we talk about the Shabaka stone. So you can see up here, just to kind of give a bit of a review, because we've talked a little bit about this before, just to give some perspective. The idea of netter, the Kemetic people believe that there was one source, one source that was almost unknowable, one source that was without form, that, almost, when you think about the first verse of the Bible, the darkness was upon the face of the deep, the earth was without form, it was a void, if you will, that the ancient Kemetic people believe in there being a kind of a formless, a shapeless, if you will, deity, all-powering, all-knowable, conscious, that brought everything into being. And they referred to that deity, that God, as netter. So the concept of one God was there in ancient Kemet. They had an idea of out of one comes many. And we've heard that, quite a bit in a lot of things, probably just hearing it in modern times. You've heard out of one comes many. That's basically the idea. From a netterology perspective, and I call it netterology, from a netterology perspective, there's one God, and there are different aspects of God that are magnificent. And there are different aspects of God that are so significant that they deified them, if you will, because they deified them, personified them, and gave them certain levels and certain ranks. I mean, just imagine a garden, right? And imagine the ground, if you will, and it's a huge ground, a ground giving birth to, bringing forth all kinds of things, all kinds of trees and grasses and food, if you will. Think of how many things that the ground brings forth. How many different types of flowers? If we wanted to just think about flowers, we say, wow, the ground is amazing. Kind of imagining netter as being that ground, the all-encompassing ground that brings forth everything. And within it are the secrets of life. Within it are the things that brings life forth. And so you might say, well, netter will produce trees. Well, your ground will produce trees, or it will produce beautiful flowers. You can go to all different types of flowers, many, many different types of flowers. Flowers, and then plants that may not flower, but they're plants in themselves. bushes, shrubs, all types of things. Then you try to say, wait a minute, it's not just producing, it's producing food, right? It's producing food like plants and food that you can eat, vegetables that grow out of the ground, trees that produce fruit, that give life to animals and give life to human beings and to people and all kinds of life forms. You start to say, wow, there's a lot coming from this one source that in this case, we say the ground. In a Kemetic sense, they talked about the waters, right? Kind of the shapeless waters that would bring forth everything. And this consciousness netter is inside that. And you can make that same kind of metaphor and analogy and look at it like the ground, something that is difficult for you to see underneath with your naked eye unless you dig. And it brings forth all of these different manifested life forms and wonderful, incredible things. So from a kinetic perspective, that's how they could believe in there being one source for all creation, and then there being manifestations of that. And they simply just put it down into a science. They put it down into a way where you can think about it, where you can personify it. They took concepts that are difficult to think about and difficult to kind of imagine and to communicate, and they put them into words, and then sometimes sounds, right? And sounds that may not mean something specifically, but carry a certain energy and a certain meaning in and of itself with it. And they also, and so they put them in, and that's why their hieroglyphs had pictures, because we say a picture's worth 1,000 words. So from a Kemetic perspective, netter is a source of all things. Netter is a source of things, but Ptah is an expression of God. Is one of the expressions of God that at times was given the height and called as if it was the creator, if you will. So Ptah, in my opinion, has a lot to do with breathing and the concept of being able to connect. And we'll talk about why breathing and that whole idea of manifestation and monitoring is so important, and why that's connected to Ptah when we talk about the Shabaka stone in just a second. And so that idea being the idea of God able to bring things into life and to breathe the breath of life and to speak things into existence. That's an aspect of God, an aspect of netter that they basically call Ptah. And then you also find them talk a lot about Atum, because when we talk about the Shabaka stone, you're going to hear them mention Atum as well. And Atum to me sounds a lot like Adam. Right? Not just Adam from the Bible, from an Adam sense, but also atoms that we think about. A lot of times, I hear people say, and I'm not, dissing, the Greeks at all. People will say that, the Greeks or certain Greeks were the first to conceive of something being so small that it was nothing smaller than that. And they kind of named the word atom after that. And I say, I'm not so sure that they were the first to say that. I'm not going to diss them. But I know that a lot of people have concepts of things being a beginning, or things being broken down, or there being no source beyond a certain source, and there being one source, if you will. So I'm just no dissing. I think that other people had those thoughts as well. But the whole concept of Atum has to do with rejuvenation, has to do with being rejuvenated and bringing things into believing. God bless you. Hope you're doing well. Thank you so much. And so when we think about it, so it has a lot to do with we'll talk about that, the Persians. Yeah, it has a lot to do with rejuvenation and being able to rejuvenate yourself. One concept and one aspect that God has is God can create out of nothing. God can create itself, rejuvenate things out of nothing. Needs no help. Similar to the ground, right? Whether we till the ground or not, there's going to be soil. There are going to be things that are going to be growing. There are going to be different things that are going to be taking place. That's going to happen whether you're in the ground or not. And I want to just mention, because some folks were asking in a comment, like, when did this take place? And in terms of what was taking place. So the idea of Shabaka stone, and when King Shabaka reigned, it was in the 8th century BC, which we'll get into in just a minute. And someone was asking whether or not the Persians were ruling ancient Kemet at that time. The Persians weren't ruling ancient Kemet in the 700s BC. They didn't come along until a couple hundred years later after that. So they definitely were there. So around 525 BC, but they were not there. They were not at this time the powerhouse ruling ancient Kemet in the 8th century BC. The Persians weren't. Who was on the rise at this time was Assyria. So the Syrians were on the rise, and they were about to kick a lot of people's butt, and they were about to invade ancient Kemet right around the time that King Shabaka was living. So you may get it confused. Sometimes you might get the Syrians and the Persians confused, but the Persians came along after the Assyrians, and around this time, 8th century BC, 6th century BC, you will see a lot of impact with the Assyrians, and the Persians come after that. So hopefully that's a little bit clear. But the Assyrians come first, and they are really rearing their heads, if you will, around about this time in the 8th century BC, and in particular around 701 BC, and shortly thereafter they're fighting, and they will eventually invade Kemet around this time. But just prior to that, so getting back to talking about this, so netter is also giving forth Atum. And as I mentioned, Atum is that which is has the ability to rejuvenate itself. So you think about these aspects of God that we're talking about, which they talk about in the Shabaka stone as being so significant, so fundamental to the concepts and the characteristics of Netter, that at times they were all used as being talked about as being the creator. So you will find them mention that Atum is the creator, and Atum is the Lord of all the gods, the Lord of all the deities. At times you'll mention them see Ptah is the creator, which they talk about in the Shabaka song. You see them mention that. You also see Amen as mentioned as being the creator. And you see that a lot during the New Kingdom and during the time that King Shabaka was around, because King Shabaka and the Kushite family were literally, there and kind of taking over and very important at Ipet Sut, the temple of Karnak, that was dedicated to Amen. And when you go back and you look at the whole geography in ancient Kush, you will find that Jebel Barko and many, many temples at this time were dedicated to Amen. Even after this was over, they were still serving and worshiping Amen. So this concept of Amen, and Amen represented that part of God that was hidden, that part of God that you couldn't see, that there's an aspect of Netter, an aspect of God that is hidden, that's kind of under the surface, under the water, if you will. And it's significant because it's really the cause of all life. It's really what brings all life to fruition. And they a lot of times would call Amen the Lord of the gods, Amen as the creator God. You will hear that as well in ancient Kemetic theology. And finally, you also hear about Ra. And so Ra, as you know, people say a lot about Ra. A lot of times the king was the son of Ra, the son of Ra's body, or the bodily son of Ra. They would literally say that. And Ra represented force, represented movement and life force and the ability to be animated and to act and to do. And obviously it was represented and symbolized in the sun. The symbol for it was the sun. And that whole idea of force and being able to breathe things and moving and having an excitement with you, that concept was embodied in Ra. And many times the sun or the pharaoh, the king, the ruler, will be called the son of Ra. So these, you will see from time to time, these four deities, Ptah, Atum, Amen, Ra, all being sometimes put together, because you'll hear Amen, Ra, all being referred to as the deity, all being referred to at some point in time as the creator, and given that kind of space in their literature, but not seeming as if they are contradicting themselves at all. So when King Shabaka starts to talk about this, he's not contradicting himself when he talks about Ptah, even though he is literally representing the temple of Amen and doing various things with Amen. He's not contradicting himself. He sees this all as coming from one source. These are all aspects of God that are so high up that they can almost be God themselves, that they're that close to the characteristics of Netter. So you can let me know what your thoughts are. I'd be glad to hear your thoughts and kind of put it down below. But I want to kind of jump into this a little bit and talk a little bit about the Shabaka stone and what it was and what it said. And as I said before, if you are a member, I want to thank you so much. It's just $4.99 a month for those who have helped and support. I very much appreciate it. It helps me do. But if you want to read some of the things you want to download, I provide resources that you can read. And they'll be putting up more very soon. There's so many things that I'm working on. I'm going to be putting up more and putting it on the site that's there available for members. And I change the password every so often, so the members will know the password and how to get there. But a lot of people want to read, a lot of people want to look at things and not just kind of talk about them, right? They want to really be able to kind of dig in and really kind of have a meditative experience with it, because you want to look for these things for yourself. And so many times I've heard about the Shabaka song, but I didn't know what was in it, right? So let's talk about what's in it. And so in this talks about, and this was written in the 8th century BC, so the 700s BC, that's when King Shabaka was in control. He came into control after King Pianki. And we talked about King Pianki yesterday and his whole victory style and how he went through Upper Kemet and Lower Kemet and basically all of Egypt, all of Kemet, taking over town after town, and how he did it in the name of Amen. How he served Amen, very interesting, how he served Amen before going on his military expedition. And then how when he got to Memphis or Hecapatah, the city of Ptah, if you will, the area of Ptah, he served Ptah and offered in that temple. And when he went on to Anu, where the temple of Ra was, a very important temple of Kemet, he went into the holies of holies, the chamber by himself, opened up the chamber and then sealed it on his way out. So here was King Shabaka's brother, King Shabaka's relative, doing the same thing, honoring Ptah, honoring Ra, honoring Amen, all in the same military expedition, and there not being any conflict there. So this idea that there's different aspects of God is very significant. And I think we ought to pay more attention, to not so much, we get what people say and how their concept, but really how you treat people. When we think about theology, a lot of times we're caught up on terms, we're caught up on all these different minute details and what you say this word is and that type of thing, but we don't really think about how people treat people. And a lot of times the proof of what you're doing is how you treat everybody else. Do you treat people the way you want to be treated? Really, do you really treat people how you want people to treat yourself? And that becomes, the golden rule, as we know, and the way in which we can almost judge. And from a Kemetic standpoint and a Cushite standpoint, that concept of ma'at is all about that. It's all about how you treat people, all about how you live truth, all about how you live life, all about how you're manifesting these things in your life. So as we talk about this is related somewhat to the Shabaka stone, and as I mentioned, is written in the 25th dynasty, and they believe that this was possibly maybe a gift or something that King Shabaka had sent, because he would have been, they had their capital in the Sudan, so they would have had their capital in Napata. So he would have been, in Napata or perhaps in Waset, and it might have been something that he wrote to give as an olive branch, if you will, to the priests who were at the Ptah, the city of Memphis, which was the city of Ptah. That Ptah was a deity there, and it's literally called the city of Ptah, or the house of the Ka Ptah. That this may have been sent by King Shabaka to the priest at the house of the Ka Ptah, which would be in Memphis, right? So as we talk about it and kind of jump into it, now he talks about right here, and as this whole idea of supreme being, he begins to kind of to jump on this, and I'll just kind of make it so we can see it there. He begins to jump into this and really start to say, he at the beginning, this is King Shabaka having the introduction. And obviously this is the scribe writing it for King Shabaka, but you put down what the king wants you to put, right? So it says, the living Haru. The kings were considered to be Harus, right? They were ruling in place of Asar. So when you look at the Asar and Aset Tel, the Asarian Tel, and I've done a video on that. You can take a look at it on this channel. Maybe I'll put a link to it down below. But the Asarian Tel represented, the idea of Asar having been killed by his brother and risen again. And Asar representing that which is divine. The divinity in man, the divinity in you, and the divinity in me, and Haru being that aspect of us, which is our divine will, that aspect of us being able to choose to be like God and to follow God and to take our place on the throne. In other words, take our life and the seat of our lives to allow it to be where we are allowing God to be in control and not other things. We are allowing and really connecting with our divinity. We are allowing ourselves to be ruled by God, allowing ourselves to be ruled by Ma'at, allowing ourselves to live within that. Because I was talking today and interact with someone. There was, somebody was having a really, really bad day. I know someone was having a really, really bad day. And I'll share this with you. You can kind of tell me what you think about it. This person was having a really bad day. And they were, in a situation where they lost their job. And, they have children to feed. And there's a lot of things. They're experiencing a lot of challenges. And although they were experiencing these challenges, one of the main things they were trying to do, what we try to do when we're having very difficult challenges, is to cope with it. And sometimes when you don't have an idea of who you are, when you're not in touch with your divinity, a lot of times you may come with a difficult situation. And even though there's a way out, even though there might be something you could do, you may not be able to see it. You may be in a situation where, and I'm not talking about, there are those of us who need serious help, so that we need help. And I'm not saying we shouldn't see, psychiatrists or doctors, psychologists, see professionals. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that a lot of times we don't have a system in place to help us deal with the challenges of life. And when we get in those situations, we're not connected with our divinity. So we don't know, we don't even believe that we can do something that we're able to do. You might get an offering you may get somebody say, here's an idea I can offer you. Here's help I can offer you. And you may even think that, I'm not worthy of it, or I can't do it, or that's too big for me, or my mind is not there. And a lot of that, I believe, has to do with a lot of religious systems not having in place real ample ways to help teach people to deal with real challenges. I don't even think we teach people how to pray. This is just my opinion. You may have a different opinion, right? That you may think about that slightly differently, but I don't even think that we really teach people how to pray. I think that we say things and we give verses and we give things to read, which are very good, but we kind of stop there. I heard someone say that, a lot of people in churches and various places will talk a lot about financial security, but don't teach it. We'll tell people to maybe save or tell people to give in time, but don't teach them concepts of financial security. And I think that sometimes it's the same thing about prayer and coping. So this person was trying to cope with and was not able to see that there was a way out. There was a way to handle this, and they weren't really to see that. And I think part of that is because of lack of self-esteem. But imagine this, read about this. When you think and you look at a lot of Kemetic literature and you look at a lot of Cushite literature, you very rarely see them talk about themselves in negative ways. You very rarely see them not connecting themselves with their divinity. Almost all the things you see that have survived, that we have looked at, especially when you go back older, especially when you're talking about anything religious, it is talking about them connecting themselves with the divinity. This whole idea of Neter, the whole idea of Ra, the king was the son of Ra, the bodily son of Ra. When you read about people, and it's not just kings, you can read about scribes, you can read about queens, you can read about priestesses, you can read about various types of people, and they'll say that they are the Asar, that they were the Asar Ani, or the Asar, whatever their name might be, Asar Mentuhotep, whatever, they are actually calling themselves and referring to themselves as Asar, which was the representation of divinity, which was the divine person who ruled Kemet in the early part of its being, in the early part of its life, if you will. These are people who were connecting themselves with divinity. And this right here is a depiction of the god Ptah. You may think this is a person, and maybe if you were listening, it may have sounded like, if you didn't hear the very beginning, that maybe you thought this was Shabaka. This is not Shabaka. This is Ptah. This is a representation of Ptah. Ptah, as in that aspect of God that is the creator of all things. This is the power. Imagine being able to see God in yourself, right? You look at yourself and you see God. You look at God and you see yourself. You see the reflection of, and that's what a lot of the Kushite and the Kemetic deities and theology was doing. And I think that's something that we're missing today. We can't see ourselves in God. We don't connect ourselves with the divinity, because a lot of times it doesn't mean you're not going to have challenges, but you are going to have challenges at times that you can address, things that you cannot overcome. And if you don't have that belief, you can't overcome. I remember seeing something online where LeBron James was talking about something, and people were asking him, about whether or not his legend or whatever it is. And he basically said, I don't give a crap. He didn't really say crap. He said, like, therefore he said something else, but he said, I am that dude. They asked him what his nickname. He said, I am him. In his mind, he's saying, I am that dude. I don't care what you say. I don't care what that person says. I don't care who says what. I am that guy. I am that dude. That's what he was saying. And how is it that you think about people who do things amazing in life, and they look at their skills and their talents, they can't go into those situations having doubt. And so I think part of that connection is why in the Memphite theology, in the Shabaka stone, as well as when you read these things, you see them connecting with the divinity and connecting with the divine. So here is Shabaka saying that the living Haru, he who benefits the whole land. So he's calling himself Haru, that he's the golden Haru. He's the ruler of Upper and Lower Kemet, and he's the son of Ra. He's calling himself the son of God's body. And it's not just him. Other kings did it, and other people did it. The son of God's body. I am really a manifestation of God. I'm a living manifestation of God. That he's saying right here that he is loved by Ptah, and that he's developing a new copy. And what the Shabaka stone, he's saying that this is a new copy written by King Shabaka in the house of his father Ptah. Right. And he just said he was the son of Ra, but he's calling Ptah his father. I'm just pointing out, when we talk about Neterology and them being able to see God manifested in different things, and there not being a conflict in it, in this document, you see him call himself the son of Ra and then call Ptah his father. And there be no contradiction to that. Nobody's saying that that's a contradiction. They're all saying that these are aspects of God that I think they kind of understand it. We may be the ones who are not clear with it, but it says the king found that this was the work of his ancestors, and that it was something that was decayed and was worm-eaten. So they're saying apparently this was a papyrus or some type of document that was written a long, long time ago that had been, decayed a bit, and the worms had gotten to it, and that King Ptah, that Shabaka was going to rewrite this. Shabaka was going to write this even better than what it was written before. That he was going to write this in honor of Ptah. And he was gonna do it because it couldn't be read in its entirety, and he was gonna recopy but add things to it. So as you start to think about this, it says this is a work done by the son of Ra, Shabaka, for his father Ptah. So he's doing it better than it was done before, so that his name will be honored in the house of his father Ptah, and it's going to be done better. He's the son of Ra again, and Shabaka for his father Ptah. So right there in the same area, right there in the same line, if you will, he's talking about Ra and Ptah in the very same line. And then it says, he's the ruler of Upper and Lower Kemet. And it says Ptah, who was referred to by his great name. And he starts to refer to him in ways that you may refer to Aten or Atum. And so you start to see that conglomeration goes again. And then it kind of gets into a whole story and discussion about Geb and about Haru and Set. And if you remember the Assyrian tale, and you remember that Haru fights Set for a long period of time, and Haru is trying to win the kingdom back so that his father, who's now deceased and gone to the other world, the netherworld, can be honored, right? So he's going to sit on the throne of his father, but his uncle Set has taken over the throne and would not allow Haru to sit on it. And they go into a very, very long battle. You will find the concept of the Saurian tale told over and over again in ancient Kemet. And as they tell it over and over again, to me, it represents your own will. I believe Haru represents your own will, and Set represents that aspect of you that can sometimes get things with force. But if it's not in control, if it's not checked and used properly, it can go out of hand. It can be something that you're too material, too object oriented, doing things too much by force, too things more to the outside, not really allowing yourself to go inside for your guidance. I believe that's what Set represents, because Set was used a lot in war and those type of where you have to be very outward, you have to be very forceful, you have to be very focused if you as you're fighting someone. But that's not necessarily how you want to live your life. You want to live your life in a situation where God is ruling, which is on the inside. So the whole first part of the Shabaka stone talks about Set and Haru, and it talks about Geb, who was one of the deities, which represents Earth. One of the things that was brought forth, right, from, and I'll kind of show as we, just so you can see that and have that perspective. You're looking at this is what it's talking about. So you would have either Ptah or Atum or Ra, however the story was being told, that they would be the ones who would bring forth life, and then you would have them bring forth Shu and Tefnut, and Shu and Tefnut were representative of the air and dryness and water and moisture. That whole concept of air and dryness and water and moisture was there in ancient Kemet, and it was that air and dryness and water and moisture that brought forth Geb, that brought forth the earth. That's what they're saying. And so Geb becomes the ruler of the earth, and he's looking at the deities. This is the first part of the Shabaka stone. This is the first part of it, and he begins to take Haru and Set, and he says, you know what, you people stop fighting. Set, you go into the southern part of Kemet and Upper Kemet, and you can rule there. And Haru, you go into the northern part of Kemet where your father was drowned, and you rule there. And you guys stop fighting. And they stopped fighting. But then Geb started to think, and he said, you know what? That's not right. I don't feel that Haru is being given his rightful place, because he is the son of my firstborn. He's the son of Asar. He's the son of my firstborn, and he should be in control of the whole kingdom. He shouldn't be splitting this with force and with anger. He should be in control of the whole kingdom. So he changes his mind, and he says, I'm going to make Haru in charge of everything. And I'm going to make sure that Haru is in charge, and this is how we're going to go forth, and this is how things are going to be settled in a way that's righteous. So that's the first part of it. And that's literally what they talk about. And it talks about Haru being there and them making peace, and Geb changing his mind about his decision and putting Haru over top of everything. So that's the very first part of the Shabaka stone. And then it starts to go into a different tale. It starts to go into and talk about Aset, who is Haru's mother, and being able to resurrect Asar. And it talks about Haru, being satisfied and Set when they ended their fight. And Haru was put in charge. That aspect of yourself that's representing the divine, when you choose to be divine, is now in charge of your life. That's when you begin to have peace and things being directed appropriately. So that's the very first part of it. And they talk about Asar. And then, Aset is telling them to make peace between themselves. And then it starts to go into a different thing. Then it starts to change kind of abruptly, right? It starts to change. And then King Shabaka starts to say that Ptah is that which brings forth the lesser deities into being. Ptah brings forth all the gods into being. This is what Shabaka starts to say. So it takes a turn after it talks about, God bless you. Hope you're doing well. Thank you, Timmy. God bless you. Hope you're doing well. It takes a turn, and he starts to really talk more about theology. And here's where you can analyze it yourself. You can come with your own opinions. I want to share this with you, let you read it, let you see it. And like I said, if you're a member, you can download it, read it yourself. You kind of take your time with it. But you can decide for yourself what this means, right? That's the beauty of reading. That's the beauty of theology and religion. And that's the beauty of knowing these things for yourself and not just hearing somebody give it to you and give you a portion of it, right? You can look at it, read it yourself. So Ptah is that which brings all of the other deities, some of the lesser deities in being. And it says Ptah Nun is the father of Atum. Ptah Nuet is the father of Atum, is the mother of Atum. So Atum is that same aspect of God that we were talking about that is rejuvenating. So now in this particular document that Shabaka, King Shabaka, the Nubian king of the 25th dynasty, is writing, is having written and sending to the people in Memphis, he is saying that Ptah is the father of Atum, that Ptah is the mother of Atum, that Ptah is great, that the heart and tongue of the 9 gods. So he is starting to say that Ptah now, all the deities that you see, God willing, all these magnificent things that you see, their tongues and their hearts are really Ptah. really what you see it as we use the analogy as a tree or a beautiful flower. What you see is that beautiful flower. What's in that flower is God. The heart of that flower is God. The essence of that flower is God, is Ptah, and that's the deity that Shabaka is talking about. The essence of who you are is really Ptah. So he's saying even the deities that you look at, the wonderful 9 deities that are the top deities, if you will, that their heart and their tongue, that Ptah is their heart and their tongue. That's really what Ptah represents. And then it starts to say, there took shape in his heart, and there took shape on his tongue the form of Atum. He's saying that Atum, this whole concept of developing the first aspect. Imagine if God was a consciousness and that God woke up, and the very first thing God did was to will. That aspect being that's Ptah, the very first, just the act of God waking, just the act of God becoming aware or wanting to become aware is Ptah. And then God decides to create rejuvenation, to create aspects of itself. So that very first act of just God waking up is like Ptah. And then in God's heart and on God's tongue, the form of Atum took. God spoke Atum into existence, this concept of rejuvenation. Ptah gave life to all the lesser gods and their cause and their spirits through his heart and his tongue. From the same as Aru came forth Ptah, and from the same as Tahuti came forth from Ptah. So he's saying that both Haru, which is that concept of divinity, and Tahuti, which is your concept of God's wisdom and God's plan for your life, all of that came forth from Ptah. That Ptah brought through with his heart and his tongue all of these things. Your divinity, your will, even your wisdom came from Ptah, came from God. And then he begins to say, the heart and the tongue control all the limbs of the body. You know, the heart, it is your heart, is Ptah's heart that's in everything. And it's Ptah's tongue that's in every mouth. So the heart and the tongue control all of your limbs and all of your limbs. That literally what you believe, think about this for a second, what you really feel in your heart. We'll go back to this. And what you speak with your tongue controls what you do. And I think about the person I was talking about this morning, who was having a really bad day. Stop and think for a second. If you really believe in your heart that you are not worthy, if you really believe in your heart that you're going to fail, come on now, because that's what we're doing, right? If you really believe it, and then you start to speak it. And then when you get something that might actually help you, say, no, I can't do that. You are speaking your own reality. Right? You're speaking. And sometimes we don't even know that's the case. Everybody tells us that. Athletes tell us that all the time. You think of Muhammad Ali. He comes out in his major first battle, maybe his first big bout, and he's saying, I'm the greatest. I'm a bad man. I shook up the world. People tell you that all the time. What you speak and what you believe and what you feel is really what comes into play. And it's not just, and what Ptah, what Shabaka is saying here, it's not just some esoteric pie in the sky. This is literally the truth. This is literally what King Shabaka is saying. This is literally the truth. What you believe in your heart, what you feel in your heart, and what you speak with your tongue, with your mouth, is what's going to come in your life. Now imagine we stop and let's take this back again. If we take to what we were talking about earlier, the concept of seeing yourself as the divine, of being able to see God in you and you in God. Right? That concept of seeing yourself in the divine and seeing God in you. What if you really felt that? What if we really believed that? What if you spoke that in your own life? You don't even got to speak to people in your own life, in your own thoughts. When you talk to yourself, when you're reading, when you're making your plans, you really felt that. You understood, I am connected with God. Now, a lot of things that may seem difficult, right, aren't as difficult. I tell the story all the time because the story is so relevant, and I keep telling the story, but I'll tell it again because I think it's relevant. It's the story of Harriet Tubman. I've told when she was on several of her trips, and this one particular trip she was on, taking people with her, and she was on a road, and that road she just got a feeling in her heart. She just got a feeling not to go down that road. That she didn't know, but she got a feeling, and God told her to go across the water. Now the water was like, and if you go on the eastern shore, it's water. I mean, it's the Chesapeake Bay, so it's going to be waters all up and down there. You don't know when you get into a body of water how deep it is, and they could tell the water was moving. So the people with her were concerned. There were several men with her. Several men with her were concerned that maybe, this water might be this might just sweep us away. There are waterways all around here. You can't just go walking in the water. And she said, God told me to go. I think there were about 5 or 6 people on this trip, mostly men with her on this trip. And so she went. She was like, basically, I'm going. Like, y'all can stay here and talk, but this is where I'm going. And of course, they are scared. They're running away from being enslaved. They're scared. They follow her. And she told the story later on, and she laughed, but she said, she walked across this creek. They didn't know how deep it was. The water was moving. There was a flow. There was a current there. So they weren't sure what they were walking into. She said, and it's so funny that God never let the water get above my chin. As I walked in, it kept getting deeper and deeper. I kept going down. As I kept walking, it never got above my chin. And she walked directly across, and she had to do this twice on the same trip. And I think about that, and it turned out when she got to a safe house, a house that she could get help in, they said, oh, we were so concerned about you. We were worried because there was a patrol out, and they were on that road that she was going to go down. And when I think about that, Harriet Tubman was a person connected with God. There's so many people, even now, which is why we respect her, who would say, you couldn't do that. And, and you won't be able to do that. This trip will not be able to be made. You're not going to be able to be in the Civil War and to be a spy and to be on the ground on the battlefield with bullets whizzing by your head, because that's not possible. But see, she didn't have a connection with other people. She really believed and knew and felt that she was connected with God. So she took chances and did things that other people may not do because they don't believe it's possible. And all I'm saying is that King Shabaka, this Cushite king, was saying at this time, thousands of years ago, more than 3,000 years ago almost, saying, you know what? Whatever you believe in your heart and whatever you speak with your tongue is what's going to manifest in your life. That's why it's so important for you to believe the right thing. It's so important for you to know and to be in touch with the right thing. And so he talks about Ptah being in all things. And it says, Ptah, the lesser gods are performed as his teeth and his lips. That they are literally his teeth and his lips. Now, there was another version of creation. So there are several creation stories where the people of Kemet talked about, Atum being the one to create, or Ra being the one to create, or in this case, Ptah being the one who creates. And the Atum one, since Atum represented rejuvenation, it talked a lot about a man's seed and how this man's seed would be what brought things into life. So it talks about Atum with respect to the man's seed. And so Shabaka is referring to that in this, saying that, they were the semen, if you will, they were the man's seed of Atum, but for Ptah, they are really the teeth and the lips. They are really what's being spoken and not necessarily rejuvenation in that way. That Ptah is doing it with his heart and with his will, not through an act of rejuvenation. And so he says, so the lesser gods are the teeth and the lips of Ptah, which say the name of everything, from which Shu and Tefnut, which we just talked about, came into being, and for which all the lesser gods themselves came to being. So he's saying that Ptah developed that whole concept of air, that whole concept of dryness. And if you read some of the information about Shu and Tefnut, even in Iwalis Boji, if you look at the Papyrus of Ani in various places, he talks about Shu and Tefnut in particular being Nubian Sudanese deities. This whole concept of this airness and dryness of being older deities that come from Sudan, come from Nubia. And so when you think about this, he's saying that Ptah brought that into existence first, and he gave them names. And from a Kemetic standpoint, a lot of times the names that were given to these deities were also part of like the mantras that they taught and the sounds. And I don't know if you've ever thought about it. You can tell me what your thoughts are about it, but I know a lot of people, God bless you, maybe one day we'll be able to lecture some places, just intention, right? Intention, maybe we'll do lecture some places. So a lot of times, what you're thinking about in terms of, how you're bringing things forth and what's your intention there, you start to have a significant thing that happens with Ptah. So I was going to make a point, but I'll probably come back to it. So he's saying, so Ptah, Wallace Budge was saying that these were Nubian deities. And the idea is that you are bringing these deities into being, that Ptah is willing these things into being. And so as you're doing this, he starts to say something that makes you start to think about it. If you start to on your own, like don't even take on your own, if you get anything out of this that helps you, even one time in your life is worth it. If you get anything out of it that helps you think about the Creator and God's relationship to you, I hope this is it. I hope this thing's right here. He says right here, hearing, seeing, and breathing all feed into the heart, and it makes every belief come forth. Hearing, seeing, and breathing, they all feed into your heart, and they make every belief you have come forth. And I want to stop. If you get nothing else, like if I stop right here and don't say anything else, we can stop right here with respect to the Shabaka stone. Because to me, that is the answer to so many things. I was talking to you about the person who was having a difficult day and didn't believe in herself and thinks that a lot of things can't be overcome when they actually can. Think about that. You have to stop and ask yourself, what are we hearing? What are we seeing? What am I seeing? What am I breathing on? Our children do it all the time. As a matter of fact, when you come into this world, you don't speak, right? Nobody's speaking when they get out their mother's womb. Nobody's speaking, right? And it really is a long time, a couple of years, usually a year and a half, 2-3 years before you speak, right? And it's going to be a while before you speak, consistently. For the most of the time, what you're doing is observing. Think about that. As a child, when you learn in the first 3 years of your life exponentially, you learn in those first several years of your life almost at a higher rate than you learn at almost any time of your life. Imagine that, right? Because you're learning to speak, you're learning to walk, you're learning so many different things at a very, very young age, and you're silent. You aren't really, you may be crying, so you're making noise, right? So babies aren't complete, they're crying, right? And they're trying to talk, but they're not really communicating with her, but they're trying. And when your child is saying, pick me up, when your child is saying, put me down, even though they're not saying those words. But think about it. Most of what you're doing, a lot of what you're doing when you're learning that at the beginning of human life is you are listening to things. If you have those abilities, hopefully everything's working. You're seeing things, you're observing it, and you're listening, and you're doing a lot of heavy breathing because you're crying. In a sense, you're taking in a lot of information, and that's helping to develop you. It's literally helping to develop you. And if you speed that up, let's say you're 5 or 6 years old, think about our children. What are we letting them hear? What are we letting them see? And when I think about the breathing aspect of this, the breathing is not just breathing. I think what they mean here by breathing is meditation. When you literally take a thought into your heart and you breathe on it and you meditate on it, you're starting to tell yourself, I believe it. Your soul, I don't believe, tells the difference between when you are asleep or awake. You ever had a dream that seems so real that you woke up thinking like, wait a minute, did that really happen? Because it was so real to you. And it may be something that even affected you. You've been in some place and you almost dreamt about it, or it gave you such a message where you were in real life. Look, I ain't doing that. I had a dream about that. I'm not going to do that. It's almost like that dream that you had that wasn't physically real gave you a message that made an impression on you. It made you think it was real. It made you scared. It made you jump up. It made you happy. And it may have made you think about something that you were really going to do in real life. Your soul, your spirit didn't tell the difference between what was real, a physical real, and what wasn't. The reason why I say that is because when you take a thought into your mind, when you breathe on it and meditate it, especially with a certain feeling in your heart, with your will, you begin to make impressions on your soul. You begin to tell your soul what's right. What's wrong? What should I do? What should I not do? And these things happen whether you like it or not. I want to make that other point too. We may think that we don't like this, or we're mad at Shabaka. It happens whether you like it or not. That's why children, when they get all these things, coming at them, they develop beliefs. And people talk about a lot, especially, with the Olympics and various things going on. People say representation is so important. It's so important for you to see, black women doing this, or black men, or Asian people, or Hispanic people, or Caucasian people, whatever it may be. It's so important for you to see them in areas where maybe you hadn't seen them before, because why do we say that? The reason why we say this is because we know it impacts children and what they believe they can do. And we're acknowledging that your beliefs and what you think you can do, what you really believe you can do, will help you aspire to do it. Your attitude, determines your altitude. That if you really can believe that, you can aspire to do it. And here is Shabaka saying thousands of years ago, yeah, that's true. And it's not just in some type of, ancillary surface kind of way. It's true for everything. It's true that if your child is seeing a lot of movies and resources and television shows that show them negative behaviors, negative things, they're going to start to see that. They're going to listen to it. And without even saying, they're going to be breathing. And you ever go to a movie and you're seeing something, or you get into the movie and you're excited, and the child is thinking, well, I've been waiting to see this movie. I've been thinking about this movie. I think this is going to happen. And when you finish the movie, you think about, what if they ended it this way? You are literally starting to breathe on. You're literally starting to have a form of meditation, a form of prayer. All prayer is communication with God. You're having a form of prayer and meditation on this thing that you're seeing and breathing. And this is why, from a spiritual sense, I want to lay it out from a theological sense. This is why what you hear, what you see, and what you breathe on impacts you. Impacts your behavior. It impacts what you believe. It impacts what you do for life. So you see that with children, and we see that with a child, that a child shouldn't see certain things or bad things, and we should give a child good examples to emulate, because they're seeing it and they're going to emulate it. If they hear it, they're gonna try to make that sound, right? That's how they speak. And if they breathe on and start believing it, taking it to their heart, they'll start believing it. It's not only true with children, it's true with you and I. It's true with adults. It's not just kids. It's not just kids who have this. We have this as adults as well. And so when I think about this Shabaka stone, this is a beautifully written document. He talks so deeply about these concepts of spirituality and spiritual things that impact us. And I don't care whether you look at it at a spiritual level or your mind. Your mind is just a certain iteration of your spirit that's a step closer to the physical. That's a step closer to your body. That's all the mind is. It's just kind of an intermediary, we feel. It's something that's supposed to think. It's almost like a computer that's supposed to think and do logical things for you. It's literally an aspect of your spirit, a certain aspect of your spirit that's a step closer to your body. That's what your mind is. And so whether you're looking at this, from hearing, seeing, and breathing, all feed into your heart, and they make your beliefs come forth, whether you're looking at this from a mental thing and just mentally speaking, or you're looking at it from a very physical sense, or you're looking at it from a spiritual sense, it's impacting all of it. It doesn't matter. And it's not a kind of thing that we can really choose. I mean, it's just the truth. It happens to us all the time. And if we're true about it, if I'm going through something, or I'm thinking about something, or I'm having a negative thought or a bad day, I'll stop sometimes and think, what was I thinking? What did I see? What did I watch? Did I watch something that made me feel bad? Did I see something that didn't resonate? That's why I try to watch things that speak to my soul, things that resonate with me. And I want to stop for a second and just kind of check the chat, because I appreciate a lot of your comments. God bless you. To edify, taking Dravidian society. I do want to look at the Dravidians. There's so much to the Dravidians. What I love about ancient history, whether it's Sumer or the Olmecs or Kemetic, or especially Kush or the Indus Valley, the Levant, all these areas all over. It's so deep. There's so much to learn. So I plan on doing a lot wherever God leads me. I plan on doing a lot, but there's so much to learn there. And I wouldn't mind speaking at college. It all depends on how things get set up. I've done some lectures at various places before, but as I think about this whole concept, to me, is why even go through all this? This is my point, and I'm interested to see what you think. You can put your comments down below. Why even go through reading all this history? Why even go through all this reading if it doesn't impact your life, if it can't make your life better? Right? I really believe that. What's the purpose of reading our ancestors and say they did remarkable things? I can point back, and Shabaka did his thing. Shabaka lived his life. He made his contribution to the earth. He lives like, what are we going to do? Right? So to me, why read all these things if it doesn't impact our, and I don't just mean impact our lives in terms of finances. Absolutely. I'm not saying we shouldn't have resources. Obviously, we're not living in a situation or have a theology where two things can't exist at one time. This is all God's garden. Yes, you could be financially, rich, or have resources and have whatever you need in life, because that's what the garden is, right? It's providing you what you need, but you don't have to be greedy, and you don't have to take from other people. But it's not just resources. A lot of times when people talk about prosperity now, they talk about it in terms of money and in terms of financial things, and they don't talk about it in terms of spirituality. So even though the person that I was talking to, someone I was talking to, was having a conversation about finances, there were other things going on. The person I was talking about, there are other things going on that had nothing to do with money. I know someone who unfortunately took their lives, and it wasn't really because of money. You can have money, you can have resources. The money is just a resource. You can have resources, but it doesn't necessarily make you happy. When we get in, when we're talking about the Shabaka stone, and he's talking about these things, that he's talking about things that impact all areas of our lives. If a spirituality, if a theology, if a study or way of life is to help you, it should help you in every aspect, because there's no aspect of your life that God doesn't touch, that God is not in, that God that is not God. And that's literally what the Shabaka stone is saying. He's saying all creatures, all things you see, Shabaka, that Ptah is in them. And it says right there, you can see just above my head, the tongue repeats what the heart believes. Right? A lot of times people will say, I didn't mean that. Yes, you did. You said it because it was in you. It came out of you because it was in you, right? You're going to get to the point where you're hearing, you're seeing, you're seeing, and you're breathing will all feed into you. And you're going to start to speak what you believe. And when you start to hear people, when you start to hear your children, you start to hear other people say things that are very negative. And a lot of which is why I think music is so important. Music is so important because you get immersed in it. And it encompasses almost all these things. You're hearing these beats. You're almost monitoring on them. You're almost in a state of trance. Our kids are excited. They're breathing heavy. They're thinking about it. They're meditating on it. Sometimes they know words. I don't even know what they're talking about. But they're drumming up a lot of energy with it. And a lot of times these things are saying hateful, negative things. I mean, it's up to you to decide what you want to listen to, what you want to put into your mind. All I'm making the point is that, Shabaka is saying here that what you put into your mind, what you take into you, is going to develop into what you do. And if you think it's okay to take into you materialism and debauchery and drugs and all these types of negative things, horrible things that people talk about all the time, then that you can't be surprised if that's what grows in your garden. And it isn't the music per se, it's the message, right? Because some people say, oh, that's music, or that's hip hop, that's black music. It's not. I mean, if you study music, that's not black music. It may be an aspect, maybe black people doing it, and it may be an aspect of black music, but that doesn't represent all music that African Americans made. That doesn't. There are the whole genres of things. There's music is music, and music can say anything. You can sing about your statue, you can sing about this wall, you can sing about your life, you can sing about your happiness, you can sing about anything. But if you're singing about and you're monitoring on things that are negative, that's what's going to manifest. And another aspect of Kemetic religion and spirituality had a lot to do with dance and had a lot to do with song. So that becomes a significant part. So I wanted to kind of touch on that. So I'll just say this because I'm going to kind of touch on a little bit and kind of stop there because, all these things start to kind of make some sense to you. And he starts to talk about that every word that of every God came through the heart, with the heart devised and with the tongue ordered, that all the components were made of all the qualities decided. So he starts to say that everything that you see, every quality of every being, every deity, every concept of God, whether it's rejuvenation, whether it's that hidden part of God, whether it's the breathing aspect of God, whether it's the force of God, every aspect of God, every deity, every living thing, every animal, every plant, every human being, and every aspect of the human being came into being. All of its characteristics came into being because of God, because of Ptah. It was something that God had in his heart and that God willed with his tongue, and all these things came into being, and that the tongue becomes a very significant part of it. So I'm gonna, as I kind of end there, I want you to think about it. I want to end with that thought and ask you to think about it and see what it means to you. If it means anything, the whole idea that hearing, seeing, and breathing all feed into your heart, and they make all beliefs come forth. So I wanted to share that. We'll be talking more about the Shabaka Zone. I'll probably come up with it again. I thank you so much for joining. Those who are members, you have access to this. You can download the whole thing and read it for yourself and tell me what you think. I'd love to hear what you say. And so please join me again. Please share this with somebody. God bless you, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you very much.